At the 1980 Golden Globes, Peter Sellers walked away with the award for Best Comedy Performance for his role in the satirical comedy drama Being There, as well as scoring an Oscar nomination for Best Actor. The final accolades of a career that began when he was just 2 weeks old carried onto stage at the King's Theatre in Southsea, Portsmouth, the seaside resort where he was born. His parents were variety performers, constantly on tour, sometimes leaving their only child for weeks at a time. His childhood was dysfunctional, but it only set the stage for what would be a life and career beset by mental illness, tumultuous relationships, and on-set tantrums. Despite his mother's domineering and Peter's immense shyness, the two had a very close relationship. In fact, it was a relationship later described as unhealthy for a grown man by Sellers' friend Spike Milligan. When you factor in that Peter was named after his stillborn older brother, maybe the mommy issues weren't all that surprising. After serving with the Royal Air Force in World War II, Sellers decided to pursue a career in showbiz, and to secure an audition with the BBC, he called and pretended to be star radio host Kenneth Horne to get their attention. Producer Roy Spear was won over by the impression, which led to Sellers becoming a regular radio performer. By the late 1940s, Sellers had been introduced to Harry Seacombe and Spike Milligan, who he would go on to star with in The Goon Show, a legendary radio comedy programme which ran for pretty much the entirety of the 50s. Its avant-garde, surrealist humour would have far-reaching influence, perhaps most notably on a group of Cambridge University students who would go on to form Monty Python. By the time The Goon Show ended in 1960, Peter Sellers had married Australian actress Anne Howe, had 2 children, and had begun a film career starring in titles like The Lady Killers with one of his idols, Alec Guinness.
The original record-breaking shower of comics are back again in the sequel to Private's Progress, I'm All Right, Jack. I'm all right, Jack, I'm okay. And now they're joined by Peter Sellers as Kite, a man who believes in striking while the iron is hot, or cold.
Brother Windrush, I'm obliged to put to you an open question. Did you or did you not in fact collaborate with the management?
Me? Collaborate?
His shyness turned to insecurity that he would never make it in Hollywood, and his behaviour towards his family became neglectful, if not cruel. In 1960, he accepted a role in The Millionairess, telling the press that he did so because he would get to star alongside Sophia Loren, his obvious ulterior motives culminating in Sellers admitting to his wife that he had fallen in love with the Italian bombshell. He even woke his young son in the middle of the night to ask whether he should get a divorce. Sounds like he should have been putting that question to a therapist instead of a half-asleep 6-year-old. He would later declare that he never wanted to see his kids again after asking them which parent they loved more and not getting the answer he had hoped for. The couple divorced in 1962, and while his personal life was crumbling, his career was about to skyrocket.
Is that by any chance the picture called The Pink Panther? Who's in it?
Peter Sellers. We must find that woman.
Sellers' portrayal of Inspector Clouseau in The Pink Panther drew comparisons to Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton, and earned him nominations for a Golden Globe and a BAFTA. The character was largely created by Sellers himself and would become his most enduring and iconic role.
I'm so sorry, I was trying to kiss your foot.
No, it's all right, my dear.
Let me kiss your
No,
face.
it's all right.
Roles in 2 Stanley Kubrick films, Lolita and Dr. Strangelove, would cement Sellers' Hollywood credentials. Dr. Strangelove in particular gave him an opportunity to display his acting range by playing 3 different roles, something he was well used to from his radio comedy days. Sellers was full of respect for Kubrick, something that couldn't be said for other directors he worked with as his mental instability began to take hold. He had previously turned to superstitions to help get his career off the ground, visiting astrologer Maurice Woodruff and believing his life was being guided by the ghost of a music hall comedian named Dan Leno, who had died in 1904. By the height of his fame, Sellers had developed an even stranger aversion to 2 extremely innocuous things: the colours green and purple. He wouldn't wear or even act opposite anyone wearing green, and his publicists had to pre-screen any hotel room he would be staying in for anything purple, lest they suffer a violent outburst. Sellers married his second wife, Swedish actress Britt Ekland, just 10 days after meeting her, despite, or maybe because of, the 19-year age gap. He quickly became jealous, controlling, and paranoid, telling her what to wear, insisting that she spend all of her free time in his company. And while she was filming a movie in London, even had a medic tell her she was too sick to continue working. Producers unceremoniously fired her from the film, making her even more dependent on Sellers. No doubt distracted by his troubled relationship, his notoriously prickly on-set demeanour hit a new low when he started picking fights with director Billy Wilder on the set of Kiss Me Stupid.
It's happened. What's happened? She just slapped my face. Congratulations.
One night, whilst with Ekland, Sellers inhaled amyl nitrates as a sexual stimulant and suffered a really quite impressive 8 heart attacks in the space of 3 hours. He recovered but had to withdraw from filming. The director, Billy Wilder, had little sympathy for his difficult former lead. The production of 1967's Casino Royale, a James Bond parody starring Hollywood heavyweights like Orson Welles and Ursula Andress, was shambolic. Apart from 6 different directors, a slew of writers, and an escalating budget, Sellers was annoyed that the film had turned into a comedy and wanted to be in a serious Bond film. According to biographer Roger Lewis, Sellers kept rewriting the script to try to make his character more of a hero and less of a parody. He was referred to as an amateur by Orson Welles, and soon both actors refused to be in the same shot together. Sellers even punched Joseph McGrath, one of the directors, after McGrath complained about his behaviour. Sellers eventually left the film before it was finished, leaving him free to focus on destroying his marriage to Britt Ekland.
Seems like old times once more.
His next movie, The Bobo, starred both Sellers and Ekland, which turned out to be every bit the disaster you'd expect. After constant fighting, Sellers commanded the director to fire his wife, and Ekland admitted at this point that their marriage was now an atrocious sham. During the filming, Sellers' mother had a heart attack. Wrapped up in his own personal drama, he didn't visit her, and she died days later, something that he would never get over. To add insult to injury, Ekland divorced him shortly after. The next years of Sellers' life showcased a series of bad career decisions. He had a string of flops and even worse romantic choices. In 1970, with his midlife crisis still going strong, the 47-year-old Sellers tied the knot with 23-year-old model Miranda Quarry. By 1973, the marriage was failing, of course, and Sellers fell into a chaotic affair with Liza Minnelli after watching her perform. The pair were so mad about each other they got engaged within 3 days of striking up a romance, despite the fact that Sellers was already married and Minnelli was engaged. Within a month, their flame burned out as fast as it had ignited, though Sellers got divorced anyway. Probably for the best, that one. Around this time, confidants started to suggest that Sellers was in the middle of a nervous breakdown. When TV host Michael Parkinson invited Sellers on his show, the comedian felt insecure about going on without any character to hide behind. So, he dressed up as a Gestapo officer before sitting down to the interview. Yeah. The mid-1970s saw Sellers try to revive his slipping career. He appeared in several more Pink Panther movies, which did bring money, accolades, and renewed relevance, but his on-set tantrums got worse. As Sellers got older, his women stayed the same age. In 1977, he got married one last time to 23-year-old actress Lynn Frederick. She was even less equipped to deal with Sellers' outbursts than any of his previous relationships, and according to biographer Roger Lewis, she was treated worse than any of them. In 1979, Sellers got one last chance at a serious movie role when he starred in the extremely well-received black comedy Being There, as the simple-minded gardener Chance. Sellers poured his heart and soul into the role, going method and staying well away from co-stars and journalists while filming. It paid off, and the part earned him a Golden Globe and an Academy Award nomination. As always in the life of Peter Sellers, what went up had to come down. Soon after the movie came out and charmed critics, Sellers asked his 15-year-old daughter Victoria her own opinion of the film. She answered that she loved it, and added, likely jokingly, that he looked like a little fat old man. Sellers snapped. He threw his drink on Victoria and demanded she get the next plane home. When Sellers' eldest daughter Sarah condemned his actions, he sent her a telegram that would end up being one of the last communications they had. For years, friends had been trying to get Sellers to seek medical help, particularly for issues with his heart. But despite several other heart attacks, Sellers remained stubborn. At one point, he even collapsed on set in Dublin and then went to Cannes just 2 days later. On July 22nd, 1980, Sellers had plans to meet with his Goon Show buddies Spike Milligan and Harry Seacombe for a reunion dinner in London. He would never make it. That afternoon, Sellers had another heart attack at his hotel and died a couple of days later at the age of 54. As he was put to rest, Sellers had one final practical joke to play on his fellow goons, insisting that Glenn Miller's In the Mood be played at the service, a song they despised. There was evidence to suggest that Sellers, growing tired of his marriage to Lynn Frederick, was trying to cut her out of his will entirely, but died before the paperwork was completed. As a result, his children received just £800 each from his multi-million-pound estate. The rest went to his wife, who refused to increase their inheritance. Britt Eklund later said she believed Sellers to be bipolar, but he was fully opposed to seeking any kind of professional help. There's no doubt he was a difficult and enigmatic figure with a complicated view of himself. When he appeared on The Muppets Show 2 years before his death, he had declined to appear as himself, instead trying on various costumes and accents. When Kermit suggested he could just be himself, he replied, "I could never be myself. You see, there is no me. I do not exist. There used to be a me, but I had it surgically removed." Well, at least he didn't dress up like a Nazi. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe for more. Throughout his life, Jack Lemmon tried to hide his personal demons. Then, during a 1974 awards ceremony, his darkest secret slipped out in the most disturbing way. Jack Lemmon's birth in 1925 sounds like the inspiration for a comedy sketch. His pregnant mother Millie was playing bridge and began feeling some pain. She couldn't tear herself away from the cards until eventually she realised the pains were labour pains, even though she wasn't due for 2 months. She rushed to the hospital but didn't quite make it to a bed, which is why Jack Lemmon was born in an elevator. His parents had a difficult relationship, and as a child, Lemmon got it into his head that his behaviour may have an effect on his parents' failing marriage. He thought that if he always acted happy and didn't create problems, his parents would stay together. Even though his logic was flawed, it kind of worked. His parents never divorced, only separating when he was 18 years old, despite their marriage being so fractured that they spent most of Jack's childhood sleeping in separate rooms. Still, these trials turned Lemmon into an almost pathologically happy kid. Well, at least on the surface. By the time Lemmon was 12 years old, he'd spent an astonishing total of 2 years in the hospital, both for general ill health and problems with his hearing. Lemmon attended Harvard College and did something that few successful people do. Not much. To make up for his slacking in academics, Lemmon focused on track sports and acting. At one point, however, his grades were so poor that the school put him on probation, meaning he could no longer participate in any theatrical productions. He may have been unexceptional, but he came up with an ingenious way around this rule. Even though the school forbade Lemmon from acting, he found a way to do it anyway. He came up with a pseudonym to get on the stage, and Lemmon, always the comedian, called himself Timothy Orange. Eventually, Lemmon transferred from Harvard College to the Navy College training program. Unfortunately for him, something unexpected happened. World War II broke out. Luckily, he didn't encounter any actual battle, but the worldwide conflict did set his career back. So, after he finally got his degree, he decided to make his way directly toward doing something that he really cared about: acting. But Lemmon's father had other plans for him. His father had always been in the baking business and thought his son would do well following in his footsteps. Lemmon had to disappoint him, but get this, instead of Dad being furious, he handed his son $300 and wished him a happy future. As he was getting his career started, Lemmon ran into a complication. While doing a string of radio and television grunt work, he met the struggling actress Cynthia Stone and fell in love. They married in 1950, but from the very beginning, this was no fairy tale. Jack's mother was supposed to make her own way to the wedding, but she didn't turn up to the ceremony, and the reason was worse than anyone thought. For some time now, Millie Lemmon had been indulging too much in drinking at home alone. While inebriated, she tried to cook a meal on the gas stove and forgot about it. Luckily, neighbours smelled the gas and saved her life. After his disastrous wedding, Lemmon's career, at least, was continuing to soar. His big Broadway break as the lead on a production of Room Service closed after just 2 weeks, but something momentous came of it. A talent scout who happened to be in the audience one night thought Lemmon had star power and brought him to Columbia executive Harry Cohn, the head of the studio. Cohn was interested in Lemmon, but there was one thing he couldn't stand: his name. Cohn demanded he change it to avoid giving critics obvious wordplay opportunities when giving bad reviews. Instead, Cohn wanted it to be Lennon, like with 2 N's. Harry Cohn was a scary man and tended to get whatever he wanted, so he was shocked when Lemmon said no. Eventually, Jack convinced him that if he changed his name to Lennon, people might confuse it with Vladimir Lenin, and that would be a whole different problem. With his name intact, Cohn soon put Lemmon in his first film, 1954's It Should Happen to You. There was only one problem. Director George Cukor thought that Lemmon's acting was awful. It turned out that Jack was a bit of an over-actor. Cukor took him aside and taught him a valuable lesson: less is more. Lemmon later said that it was this advice that defined his career. The film turned out to be a hit, which brought Lemmon to a scary place. Now that he was a star in the making, he had to negotiate a contract with the notoriously shrewd Harry Cohn. Somehow though, Lemmon came out on top again. He signed a 7-year contract, but got something most studio actors could only dream about: the freedom to work on other projects away from Columbia. This was almost unheard of in Hollywood at the time. One day, Lemmon was hanging around the Columbia studio lot when a stranger struck up a conversation. The man had a film project on the go and nonchalantly asked Lemmon if he had any interest in a role. Lemmon didn't realise it, but the man was legendary director John Ford, and the film he was talking about would put Jack on the map. The 1955 comedy drama Mr. Roberts, starring big-time actors Henry Fonda, James Cagney and William Powell, was a huge opportunity for Jack, but it wasn't without its troubles. There were big egos around and tensions began rising on set, with Lemmon taking up the role of peacekeeper. In spite of this, Lemmon made a good friend in James Cagney. Lemmon and Cagney may have struck up a friendship, but the rest of filming turned nightmarish. Cagney didn't get along with John Ford and later called him a truly nasty old man. Henry Fonda got in the mix too, with the director once punching his leading man in the jaw. Eventually, these issues and an emergency gallbladder surgery ousted Ford from the production. This was supposed to be Jack's big break, and so far, things weren't looking good. Eventually, the studio replaced Ford with Mervyn LeRoy, who had produced The Wizard of Oz, and then hired Joshua Logan as a third director. After all, Logan had written and directed Mr. Roberts for the stage. At Fonda's request, Logan reshot many of Ford's scenes, setting the production back and using immense resources. In the end, not only did Mr. Roberts look good, it was a huge success. And that wasn't all. While the heavyweight leads in the film didn't get any Academy Award nominations, Lemmon not only got a nod for Best Supporting Actor, he also took the trophy home. With the Oscar, Lemmon's blood, sweat and tears gave way to true fame. Lemmon came out of Mr. Roberts and proceeded to work non-stop. In doing so, he met iconic director Billy Wilder, who had already won an Oscar for the classic film Sunset Boulevard. One day, Wilder pitched Lemmon a movie where two men dress up like women to avoid a mafia situation. It was, of course, the film that would become Some Like It Hot. As it turned out, Lemmon wasn't Wilder's first choice. The director had wanted comedian Jerry Lewis to play the role of Jerry/Daphne, but Lemmon got it for one crucial reason. Lewis didn't want to appear in drag. He later admitted he'd made a big mistake once he saw Lemmon's success with the film. Apparently, Lemmon sent Lewis an annual box of chocolates to thank him for saying no. Lemmon is an absolute revelation in Some Like It Hot, running around in a dress with an abandon few people can manage. To see if they could pass themselves off as women, Lemmon proposed that the pair put on dresses and makeup and walk around the studio to see how people reacted. When no one raised an eyebrow, Lemmon suggested taking the test to the next level, the women's washroom. Not one woman in the washroom raised an objection. Marilyn Monroe's antics on the set of Some Like It Hot are legendary. She was late, she didn't know her lines, and most infamously, once took nearly 50 takes to say,
"It's me, Sugar."
While Curtis was notoriously cruel to Monroe about these failings, Lemmon was unfailingly supportive. Messed up lines or not, Some Like It Hot was an immediate critical and box office success. Lemmon was bigger than ever before, but that only meant it was a long way down. At this point, Lemmon's comedic chops were common knowledge, but he was starting to get antsy about getting typecast. To remedy this situation, he signed up for the 1962 drama Days of Wine and Roses. His risk didn't pay off at first. The serious film followed a self-destructive couple addicted to booze, and the change of Lemmon's tone sent about 40 couples storming out of the cinema during a preview screening. When he got the part in the movie, Lemmon wanted to see the real lives of people with addiction issues, so he spent a few evenings observing the dry-out rooms at Lincoln Heights Correctional Facility. The time he spent there was frightening for Lemmon, especially watching people suffering from alcohol withdrawal. Evidently, this experience stayed with him because it caused a horrific moment on set. In one scene, Lemmon's character is in a sanitarium in a straitjacket. He got so into portraying withdrawal that he began to go into hysterics, and the crew had to shake him back to the present moment. In the end though, like many of Lemmon's gambles, he won big. When the movie came out, the critics tripped over themselves to praise both Lemmon and his co-star Lee Remick, and they both received nominations for Academy Awards. It was official. Lemmon could do both drama and comedy. There was nothing stopping him now. Nothing, that is, except his personal life. Lemmon's career was clearly going to be long-lasting, but his marriage, not so much. He and his wife Cynthia Stone called it quits after having a son together. In 1962, Lemmon tried marriage again with Felicia Farr, having a daughter with her 4 years later. In 1962, Lemmon's father passed, and suddenly his frequently fragile mother Millie was more vulnerable than ever. For years he tried to support her as best he could, but one day it all came crashing down. In 1967, Lemmon had a date to spend the day with his mother, his wife and his daughter, yet when they turned up at his mother's apartment, there was no answer at the door. In a panic, Lemmon forced his way in, and what he saw shook him to his core. His lifeless mother, dressed perfectly for a day with her boy. Doctors said that the cause of death was heart failure. With both parents now gone, Lemmon threw himself into work, for better or worse. By the 1970s, Lemmon had appeared in countless films and decided it was time for a passion project. He began lobbying Paramount to help him make Save the Tiger, a message movie about the crumbling American dream. The studio finally agreed, with one stipulation: it had to cost less than $1 million. Lemmon was so convinced that he could make Save the Tiger into a great film, he did something drastic. He took a huge pay cut. He gambled on the movie being a hit, but what he ended up with was a disappointment. Save the Tiger did poorly with audiences, and this showed in the box office receipts. Even though Save the Tiger as a whole was a flop, Lemmon's performance wasn't. As they had so many times before, critics singled him out as the bright spot of the film, and he won the Academy Award for Best Actor. In 1962, Lemmon had wonderfully portrayed a man with an addiction to booze in Days of Wine and Roses. In 1974, his own demons came out. Lemmon was presenting an award to his friend James Cagney, and his words were downright incoherent. When people confronted him, Lemmon sheepishly blamed a combination of medication and drink. 2 years later, Lemmon was fined for driving while inebriated. Clearly he had a problem that he wasn't owning up to. In spite of his drinking problem, Lemmon continued with dramas, and they continued to bring him success. He received another Best Actor nomination for the 1979 disaster film The China Syndrome, and his final Oscar consideration was for the 1982 political drama Missing. Even so, Lemmon wanted to make a comeback into comedy, and it couldn't have gone worse. Back in the late 60s, Lemmon made a few hit comedies with funny man Walter Matthau, and reunited with him in 1981's Buddy Buddy. It was all set to be a triumph, with Billy Wilder returning to direct Lemmon. Instead, it was a huge flop. Roger Ebert said that Buddy Buddy was a comedy with no laughs, and Gene Siskel said it was the worst film of the year. In 1997, he got a role in a TV remake of 12 Angry Men, portraying the main juror who argues for clemency in the trial. Audiences loved him, and the Golden Globes nominated him for Best Actor in a TV movie. And when awards night came, something completely unexpected happened. On awards night, the Golden Globe didn't go to Lemmon, but instead to Ving Rhames for Don King, Only in America. However, once Rhames took the mic, he very emotionally called for Lemmon to join him on stage.
Is Mr. Jack Lemmon here?
An equally emotional Lemmon obliged, and Rhames then handed over the award he had just won to the veteran actor amidst standing ovations from the crowd. On June 27, 2001, 76-year-old Jack Lemmon died after a battle with cancer. But there was one thing he admitted before the end. He finally owned up to having a drinking problem, and confessed that he'd been dealing with it privately in the intervening years. Lemmon's remains are now in Westwood Village Memorial Park Cemetery, near his old friends Billy Wilder, Walter Matthau, and Marilyn Monroe. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe for more videos.
Mr. Lewis, you are a complete nut.
After Jerry Lewis died, his sons told the world the chilling truth about their father. In some circles, they say that comedy as we know it wouldn't exist without Jerry Lewis. He walked so that the comedians we know and love could run. However, the comedian's life was not nearly as straightforward nor squeaky clean as one might suspect. The king of comedy had his skeletons to hide. He was born on March 16, 1926, to two Jewish immigrants. His father, Danny Levitch, immigrated to New York from the Russian Empire, and his mother, Rachel, from Warsaw. His father performed in vaudeville, and his mother was a pianist. Lewis himself developed an impulsive sense of humour early. As a teenager, he played pranks and caused mostly harmless trouble. Lewis's early acts included a skit referred to as his record act. It was a simple gimmick. He would mime singing the lyrics while a record played off stage. By age 15, he'd landed a gig in Buffalo, but it didn't sell, and he was unable to book any more. Following this failure, Jerry Lewis seemed to have put entertainment behind him. Instead, he took on a series of jobs to make ends meet, including working as a soda vendor and an usher at theatres in New York. It wasn't until he connected with a friend of his father from his vaudeville days that things began to turn around. The The friend was Max Coleman, and he convinced Lewis to give performing another chance. Lewis began performing, particularly in the Borscht Belt, a series of resorts in the Catskills in New York that were particularly popular with Jewish vacationers. It was here that Irving Kay saw Lewis's act and became his manager. For many young men in the 1940s, their lives were put on hold as the world dissolved into conflict, but not Jerry Lewis. Due to a heart murmur, the USA rejected him from service. This allowed him to meet and fall in love with Patty Palmer, a singer. As a pair of performers, it was a natural match. They married on October 3rd, 1944, and would go on to adopt a son in 1949, then have 5 biological children throughout the 50s. From the outside, it may have looked like the perfect marriage. However, as Lewis's star began to rise, the tensions in his home life increased with it. One year after getting married, he was 19 years old and performing at the Glass Hat Club in New York City. Dean Martin, then 27 and yet to fully come into his own as a singer, was also performing. It would be another 2 years before the pair would appear together for the first time on stage. This time, Lewis was performing in the 500 Club in Atlantic City. The other singer that had been scheduled to perform had become unavailable. They had a problem, but Lewis had a solution. He suggested that Martin fill in. Anyone who's a fan of classic comedy will know that eventually Lewis and Martin became a dynamic duo. However, in the early days, that was far from the case. They were so bad initially that Skinny D'Amato, owner of the 500 Club, threatened to toss them out if they didn't improve their act. Martin and Lewis needed to find something new, or they'd be sunk before they even started.
There ain't no doubt about it, I'm no longer blue.
Another thing that fans of classic films will know is that Jerry Lewis and Dean Martin had true magic. It was their ability to ad-lib that brought about the real charm. And that was exactly what brought their success at the 500 Club. They tossed out their pre-written jokes and instead ran with an improvised set that revolved around Lewis interrupting Martin's performance. The audience loved them. Once Lewis and Martin found the magic formula for their routine, they became unstoppable. They began touring the Eastern Seaboard before ending at the popular Copacabana Club in New York. In 1948, NBC booked them for the Martin and Lewis Show, which ran on radio until 1953. At that same time, Ed Sullivan was launching one of his early shows, Toast of the Town. Martin and Lewis made a key appearance in the first episode of this variety series and would continue to make appearances on various variety shows until April 1949, when they'd try their hand at their own show. With a successful radio show under their belts, they expected their TV show to get a big reaction. But much like their early days on stage, the initial reviews were less than stellar. Their antics, which had served so well on stage and radio, failed to impress television viewers. But while they dipped their toes in television, it was Hollywood that would truly shoot their stardom to new heights. Paramount signed Lewis and Martin to a film deal in 1949. They first appeared together in My Friend Irma, a film that starred Marie Wilson and Diana Lynn as a pair of hapless roommates looking for love. While Paramount hired Martin and Lewis for comedic relief in an ensemble cast, the film showed the world the magic that was the comedic duo on the big screen. Together, they'd go on to make 14 films between 1950 and 1956. In 1950, another young actor was looking to follow in his theatrical parents' footsteps and make his mark. Sammy Petrillo was 8 years younger than Jerry Lewis and happened to bear a striking resemblance to him. Lewis didn't like the looming competition that Petrillo posed, and he wanted to do something about it. Lewis hired Petrillo to play a baby in a sketch for Colgate Comedy Hour. Petrillo recalled Lewis as being abrasive in the meeting. Although Petrillo was initially hesitant, he was persuaded to sign with MCA, Lewis's talent agency, but it backfired spectacularly. Lewis promised Petrillo work that never appeared. He wasn't helping Petrillo, he was keeping him on the shelf so that Petrillo would never find work and never jeopardise Lewis's career. Because he was a minor at the time, his father got Petrillo out of his contract with Lewis. Then, in the early 50s, Petrillo met Duke Mitchell, a singer, and they paired up as a Martin and Lewis-esque double act. Lewis was not amused, and used his considerable influence to blackball them whenever he could. By the spring of 1956, tensions were high between Lewis and Martin. As the pair gained more and more fame, the spotlight became more focused on Lewis, leaving Martin on the sidelines. Everyone called Lewis the talented one, while they implied that Martin was simply tagging along. In 1954, Martin's already frayed nerves had been rubbed raw when Look magazine published a photo of Lewis on the cover, but not just any photo. Look had taken a photo that had included both men, but cropped Martin out entirely. This was the beginning of the end. For exclusive perks like early access to new videos, priority replies to your comments, and to have your say on future content, consider becoming a Factinate member. On top of that, your support helps keep the channel going. Click the link in the description for more details. The last film that Martin and Lewis made together was called Hollywood or Bust. It was not a pleasurable filming experience. After that, they did a small series of engagements that they'd already agreed to at the Copacabana Club, which became their farewell shows. Exactly 10 years after teaming up, Martin and Lewis performed their last show together, and Lewis was on his own. Jerry Lewis had spent a decade working with Dean Martin. They had built their careers together. For many rising stars, it would have been their time to shine. But not Lewis. Following the split, he lost his confidence. Soon after, Lewis and his wife were on vacation in Las Vegas when he heard from Judy Garland's manager and husband, Sid Luft. Garland had strep throat and couldn't perform. He wanted Lewis to save the day and step into her place. Lewis may have been hesitant to step on stage as a solo act at first. However, this opportunity was exactly the push he needed. The crowd's response was rapturous and gave him the confidence to continue on his own without a partner. In response to this performance in Vegas, Lewis recorded the songs he'd sung, which earned him a record deal. He also began performing at the Sands Hotel and Casino in Vegas, which launched a new phase of his career that focused on solo live performances. They'd be a staple throughout the remainder of his career. Lewis was a bona fide performer, and he'd proved that he didn't need Martin to entertain audiences. He appeared on specials and hosted the Academy Awards 3 times between 1956 and 1959. He also remained at Paramount and began starring in films solo. He signed a contract in 1959 that not only gave him unprecedented control over his future films, but also made him the highest paid performer in Hollywood to date. A decision by Paramount in 1960 enabled Lewis to change the way films were made forever. He'd filmed Cinderfella for a summer release, however Paramount decided to save it for Christmas. Having created a hole in their lineup, Paramount wanted Lewis to make a film in order to replace it. In response, Jerry Lewis created The Bellboy, which he not only starred in, but directed, co-wrote and produced. The filming schedule was tight. Lewis was filming in the day and performing at night. Instead of a dialogue-heavy movie, the film focuses on Lewis's physical comedy. This was to save time on filming. However, the real time saver was the use of monitors to instantly review his scenes, letting him know if he needed to refilm without having to wait for dailies. Since Lewis had essentially made a silent movie, Paramount weren't happy and pulled their backing. Lewis had to use his own money in the end to finish the film. However, it was Lewis who had the last laugh. The Bellboy is one of his most popular films and was a financial success. From this point on, Jerry Lewis would continue to have a large amount of creative control over his movies, often having some hand in writing, direction, producing, or all three. Although Lewis had made his mark as a solo artist, his early days with Dean Martin followed him, and the consequences of their split were devastating. Lewis stated that he and Martin didn't speak in private for 20 years, something he regretted. However, publicly, they reunited a few times. The most famous instance was in 1976, when Frank Sinatra arranged for Martin to surprise Lewis on one of his annual Labour Day telethons for the Muscular Dystrophy Association. This was one relationship Lewis seemed to repair before it was too late. His relationship with his family, however, was another matter entirely. Despite having never made an effort to hide his infidelities, Jerry Lewis remained married for nearly 40 years. However, in 1980, his wife Patty finally had enough of his antics and filed for divorce. Sandra Pitnick was a stewardess who was also professionally trained as a ballerina. At the same time that Palmer was filing for divorce, Pitnick earned a small dancing role in Lewis's film Hardly Working. The pair married in February 1983. Lewis and Pitnick adopted a daughter in the early 90s, and he never looked back at his first family, even when it was clear his time was up. He suffered his first heart attack in 1960 when he was only 34 years old. He'd survived two more in 1982 and 2006. So when Lewis finally succumbed to his heart problems in 2017, it was more of a surprise that he made it to 91 at all. Lewis's death unlocked both praise and scrutiny on all that he'd done, particularly from his family. Patty Palmer was Lewis's wife for nearly 40 years, and together they raised 6 sons. But in the end, his parting gift to them was a heartbreaking act of cruelty. Lewis cut every single one of his sons and their families out of his will, leaving money only to Pitnick and their daughter. Following Lewis's death, several of his sons came forward to discuss what life with their father was like. His youngest son, Anthony, said that his father was unpredictable, and they would never know which version of him would come home. He went as far as calling him emotionally abusive, yet he still held some warmth in his heart for his father, unlike some of his siblings. Anthony's elder brother Gary had much harsher words for his father. Gary called him a mean and evil person and insisted that he never showed any of his children any love. In 2022, Vanity Fair reported that several of Lewis's female co-stars from films he'd made in the 60s came together to accuse him of harassment, verbal abuse, and even sexual assault. To date, nothing has come of these allegations. Despite the controversy that exists around Jerry Lewis's character, it's undeniable that he did much for the future and development of comedy. Before him, comedy was a much stiffer affair. Lewis was unafraid to be bold, to take risks, and most importantly, to laugh at himself. Many of the comedians we know and love today, such as Steve Martin, Richard Pryor, and Jim Carrey, owe their start to Lewis. Kerry, upon hearing of Lewis's death, stated that through his comedy, Jerry would stretch the boundaries of reality so far that it was an act of anarchy.
He's the one. You're on camera.
If you enjoyed this Factinate video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more incredible stories. If you want a say in who we cover next, join our membership program through the link in the description for exclusive perks. Your support means everything to us. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.
How are ya?
Pretty good, Conan.
You're doing great.
Oh, I don't know.
Chris Farley was clean in December 1997, but he fell off the wagon hard. Suddenly he was passed out in his apartment with a woman. He never woke up, but people don't realise what that woman did to him in his final moments. It was easy for comedic actor Chris Farley to plan out his career. Very early in his life, he'd decided who his role model was. The problem was that the celebrity he chose was a fellow comedian whose disastrous life choices had led to a tragic and early demise. Sadly, Farley seemed destined to repeat every mistake his idol made. He was born on February 15th, 1964, and grew up in the village of Maple Bluff, Wisconsin. Because he was overweight while growing up, the other children at school mercilessly teased him. Farley would use humour as a way to diffuse the name-calling. While studying at Marquette University, he discovered a love of sport. Here he played rugby, where his large size was an asset. He eventually graduated with majors in both communications and theatre. Later, he dove into improvisational comedy at the Arc Improv Theatre in Madison. The obvious place for Farley to go was Chicago, the mecca of comedy performance. He started there at Improv Olympic and then moved on to the Second City. Like many improvisers appearing on the Second City stage, Farley was waiting for a certain someone to notice him. Lorne Michaels is the creator and producer of Saturday Night Live, and a tap on the shoulder from him had the ability to turn a nobody into the biggest comedy star in the world. In 1990, Michaels did notice Farley, and he was soon making the trip to New York City. One of Farley's most popular characters on SNL was Matt Foley, a hyperactive motivational speaker who was always extremely caffeinated. In the inaugural sketch, David Spade and Christina Applegate were on live TV facing an animated and sweaty Farley when he did something that really surprised them. He dove through the air onto the coffee table in front of them. Their reactions are authentic because they had no idea what Farley was going to do, and the audience went wild. Matt Foley was out of the box, and Chris Farley was ready for the spotlight. For exclusive perks like early access to new videos, priority replies to your comments, and to have your say on future content, consider becoming a Factinate member. On top of that, your support helps keep the channel going. Click the link in the description for more details. In 1995, he received an offer to appear in a film with his friend, David Spade. It was a hectic schedule, as both Farley and Spade had to rehearse and perform Saturday Night Live each week, and at the same time commute to Toronto to make Tommy Boy. Eventually, the stress made Farley act out in a surprising way. One night in Toronto, Spade went out with actor Rob Lowe without Farley because he said he was sick. When Farley found out, he had an over-the-top reaction. The next day on set, he walked angrily over to Spade, who was sitting on the ground eating a sandwich, and stomped directly on his hand. What followed was an all-out brawl, and Spade ended up at the bottom of some stairs. The two eventually stormed off to their trailers. This wasn't the only spat between Farley and Spade, but all of them ended in the same way, in a peaceful reconciliation. There was a good reason why Farley was on edge. One of the things that may have made him a little emotional was that he was abstaining from any substance use while filming Tommy Boy. Well, not all substances. Like his character Matt Foley, Farley was drinking copious amounts of coffee. Some say he drank up to 27 cappuccinos a day. Even though Farley had a crazy schedule while filming Tommy Boy, he refused to let a professional stuntman do his stunts. So yes, that really was him who face-planted at the fraternity party. And ever surprisingly spry for his size, he apparently got up right after with no injuries. Tommy Boy ended up being a huge and unexpected hit. Farley now had his pick of scripts for his next film. While working on SNL, Farley had found some like-minded people. People like Chris Rock, Adam Sandler, and Tim Meadows, the so-called bad boys of SNL. As it turned out, this name came from some crazy behind-the-scenes antics, from prank calls in the middle of the night to exposing their bare bums at every opportunity. Those scamps. One time Farley was partying with a female friend in a 15th floor hotel room. Being extremely drunk and typically rambunctious, he ended up almost falling through a window. Instead, he found himself in the ER with a gash from his wrist to his elbow. This incident started a struggle with painkillers that would continue for the rest of his life. In 1995, despite their fame, the brass at NBC had had enough of both Farley and Adam Sandler. Their hijinks off the set gave the studio no choice but to lay both of them off. Thanks to Tommy Boy, Farley was still in demand for movies. In fact, Paramount already had him locked into making Black Sheep with David Spade. But Farley wasn't going to make things easy for them. He had his sights set on another script he wanted to do. It was with rival Columbia Pictures, and it was called The Cable Guy.
I don't understand.
Farley had a good reason to want to bail on Paramount. Even though the studio was insisting that he appear in Black Sheep, the truth was that they didn't even have a script. They were desperately trying to get it written before Farley could legally get out of his contract. That's when someone came out of left field to throw a wrench into Farley's plan. Jim Carrey heard about the script for The Cable Guy and expressed interest. Chris Farley was a big deal, but Jim Carrey was Jim Carrey. Farley didn't stand a chance. And as salt in the wound, Carrey got himself a $20 million paycheck, while Farley was stuck with Spade, Paramount, and less than $1 million. Another issue for Farley in Black Sheep was the director. He wanted Tommy Boy director Peter Siegel, but he turned it down. In stepped Wayne's World director Penelope Spheeris, but tempers flared immediately. Spade quickly complained that Farley was getting more time on screen than he was. It was true, and the reason was simple. Spheeris thought that Farley was much funnier than Spade.
And then all of a sudden there's a truck tire in the middle of the road.
Farley had also suddenly come to a realization, and it wasn't going to make Spade feel any better. Right in the middle of filming Black Sheep, Farley decided he wanted to show off his dramatic flair. He was actually hoping for even fewer scenes with Spade and more serious scenes with Tim Matheson. That's when Farley made a friendship-ending offer. He wanted to pay Spade not to be in the movie. But that wasn't the only thing coming between Farley and Spade. Back when they were filming Tommy Boy, Spade had started a friendship with Laurie Bagley, who had appeared as a skinny dipper in the film. Spade had a thing for her, and then made the mistake of introducing her to Farley. Farley and Bagley hit it off and started a relationship. The thing was, Farley didn't want Spade to know, so the two kept their relationship a secret. Spade eventually found out the truth, and it hurt. But he wasn't the only one who got hurt on that film. Even though Farley didn't really want to be in Black Sheep, he gave it everything he had. This meant, once again, no stunt double. So yes, that means it really was him rolling down that hill. Black Sheep certainly wasn't the hit that Tommy Boy was, and Farley took it badly. After the preview screening of the film, he did something he hadn't done in 6 months. He had a drink. One drink led to another, and soon he was back in rehab.
I don't understand what's going on in the news.
Next up was Beverly Hills Ninja. This time around, Farley was hesitant to sign on, so he had one rather large demand. He wanted his SNL buddy Chris Rock to appear in the film. Farley and Rock went way back and had actually started on SNL on the same day.
My name is Matt Foley.
Just like after Black Sheep, Farley relapsed into drug use after finishing Beverly Hills Ninja. When he came back to do reshoots for the film, he looked horrible. The crew had a hard time making this Farley look like the same one they'd filmed just a few months before. When SNL alumni Norm Macdonald wrote his feature film Dirty Work, he had his cast even before he wrote the characters. He knew that Farley would appear in his movie. Sadly, he had no idea this cameo role would be Farley's last.
I'm not likable. I don't get along with people.
Around that time, Farley was also getting ready to play one of the biggest movie characters of the 21st century, Shrek.
Simple. Fartwad gets his princess, I get what I want.
Which is?
I don't have time to set...
During the making of the film, the producers were so worried about Farley's addiction issues that they had someone follow him to make sure he didn't fall off the wagon. Sadly, Farley didn't live to finish recording his dialogue for Shrek. In October 1997, Farley made what should have been a triumphant return to SNL, this time to host. The cold open saw Tim Meadows and Lorne Michaels talk about how Farley's partying days were over. Unfortunately, that wasn't true, at least not for much longer. On the 14th of December, after a period of being clean, Farley started partying. He ended up in his apartment with a woman whose company he'd paid for. She stole his watch, heartlessly took pictures of the very inebriated Farley, and ignored the last 3 words he said to her: "Don't leave me." She did leave, and she was the last one to see him alive.
I guess I don't fit the mold.
Just 2 months after his appearance on SNL, Farley's brother found him dead, having overdosed. His fans and the comedy community were shocked. Many alumni of SNL came to the funeral, but there was one glaring omission. Many big names in comedy attended, including Adam Sandler, Chris Rock, and Phil Hartman. Conspicuous by his absence was his best friend, David Spade. Some speculated this was due to a falling out, but Spade later said that it would have been too hard to attend. Many people have noticed a similarity between the lives of Farley and John Belushi. Belushi was also an SNL bad boy and also had an early demise, at the same age as Farley, and also with a woman present. The similarity between the two was so acute that Belushi's friend Bill Murray hated Farley. He said the resemblance was too much. There was something dark about Farley's connection to Belushi. Farley knew that Belushi had had a drug issue and that he was a user because he thought it made him funnier. Farley said that it was for this reason that he got into drug use. He was just following his idol. He had tried many times to deal with the many addictions in his life. In his final 2 years, he tried 17 various treatments, but none of them took. These treatments included rehab for drug issues, weight loss centres, and AA meetings. Farley had a deep-seated belief that he had to be overweight and manic to be funny. For these reasons, his efforts to improve his life always failed. At the base of it all was his fear that people wouldn't find him funny.
Lord, that is a lot of water.
If you enjoyed this Factinate video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more incredible stories. If you want a say in who we cover next, join our membership program through the link in the description for exclusive perks. Your support means everything to us. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.